He didn't plan to fall in love again. He just went home for a short break and met the one person his heart never forgot. But sometimes, the most ordinary returns carry the weight of unfinished emotions. And Yuya felt it the moment his feet touched the familiar streets of his hometown. The reunion with Rin wasn't planned. It never is in stories like this. Rin smiled the way people do when they're surprised, but not shocked, as if part of them always knew this meeting would happen. And in that pause, Yuya felt something settle deep in his chest. Not excitement, not panic, just recognition. The conversation unfolding naturally, like a scene that didn't need rehearsal. They talked about small things at first work, mutual friends, how the town felt smaller and larger at the same time. Rin listened the way she always had, attentively, without interruption, making Yuya feel like his words mattered even when they were ordinary. What Yuya didn't say was how long he had carried her presence with him, how her memory had quietly followed him into adulthood. How admiration, when left unspoken, doesn't disappear, simply learns how to wait. Instead, he smiled, laughed at the right moments, and told himself this was just a pleasant coincidence. Conversations that moved effortlessly from light humor to thoughtful silence. There was nothing dramatic about it, and that was what made it feel real. No grand declarations, no sudden realizations, just comfort, shared space, and a sense of ease that felt rare. Yuya noticed how time behaved differently around Rin. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The weight he usually carried, expectations, responsibilities, the quiet pressure to become someone successful, felt lighter. He began to wonder if this was what he had been missing, or if it was simply what he had left behind. Rin, for her part, was different too. Not distant, but grounded. She spoke about her dreams with clarity, not urgency. She seemed content, yet curious. Present, yet thoughtful about the future. Yuya admired that about her, just as he always had. Admiration, he realized, wasn't about putting someone on a pedestal. It was about seeing them clearly and still wanting to stand a little closer. There were moments when their eyes met a second too long. Moments when words weren't necessary. Moments when Yuya felt the question forming, even if neither of them voiced it yet. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that timing might finally be on his side. But belief is a quiet thing. It doesn't announce itself. It grows slowly, fed by shared laughter and familiar roads. And as Yuya walked back to his childhood home each night, he found himself carrying something fragile and hopeful, a feeling he had once been too young to understand, now returning when he least expected it. What made those days special wasn't what happened, but how it felt while it was happening. There was a quiet rhythm to Yuya and Rin's time together, as if the town itself had set the pace. Morning light spilling across familiar streets. Afternoon conversations that drifted without effort. Evenings that ended too quickly, leaving Yuya replaying small details he hadn't meant to memorize. He started to notice how anticipation changed him. He woke earlier than usual, checking the time not out of habit, but curiosity. Would he see Rin today? Would their paths cross naturally again? Or would one of them finally suggest meeting on purpose? The question lingered, not urgent, just present, like a melody you hum without realizing it. When they did meet, it was never complicated. A message exchanged casually, a suggestion made without pressure. Those simple words carried more weight than Yuya expected. They meant choice, They meant interest. They meant that whatever this was, it wasn't imagined alone. Their conversations deepened gradually. It made him reflect on his own path, on how often he had measured success without asking whether it felt meaningful. Yuya found himself opening up in ways he rarely did. There were moments of lightness too. Shared laughter over childhood memories. Friendly debates about music and movies. Jokes that didn't need explaining. The ease between them suggested history, but it was the present that gave those moments their energy. It felt like rediscovering something familiar and realizing it had grown along with them. Yuya began to recognize the signs he once would have ignored. These were small things, easy to dismiss individually. Together, they formed a pattern that was hard to overlook. As time went on, Yuya felt the question rising within him. This time, it didn't disappear. He realized that his admiration had silently transformed into something reciprocal, something vibrant, not rushed, not dramatic, simply sincere. For the first time, Yuya allowed himself to imagine a different outcome. Not a perfect one, but a possible one. He imagined what it would be like to stay longer, to build something slowly, to see where shared intention might lead. The thought wasn't overwhelming. It was calming. But excitement has a way of sharpening awareness. Yuya became more conscious of time, the calendar, the return ticket he hadn't mentioned, the responsibilities waiting quietly beyond the horizon. He noticed Rin's schedule too, her commitments, her steady forward motion. Reality didn't intrude suddenly. It stood patiently at the edge, waiting to be acknowledged. Still, during those days, excitement carried them forward. It colored ordinary moments with warmth and meaning. It reminded Yuya of something essential, that feeling deeply isn't a weakness, and connection doesn't need certainty to be valuable. Sometimes, the most exciting part of the story isn't knowing how it ends. It's standing in the middle of it, realizing that something real is happening, and allowing yourself to feel it fully, even if only for a while. As the vacation moved closer to its end, the atmosphere around Yuya and Rin began to shift, not dramatically, but unmistakably. The light conversations were still there, the shared smiles, the familiar walks. Yet beneath them ran a quiet awareness that time was no longer generous. It had become precise, measured in remaining days rather than open possibilities. Yuya felt it first in the pauses, in the moments when a sentence ended and neither of them rushed to continue. In the way, he found himself looking at Rin a little longer, as if memorizing details he hadn't needed to before. Her expressions, the calm confidence in her voice, the steadiness with which she spoke about the future, all of it made him admire her even more and made the truth harder to avoid. There was a moment when he considered saying everything, not dramatically, not to persuade, but to be truthful, to finally put words to feelings he had carried since youth. But he paused, not out of fear, but out of care. He realized that honesty isn't just about expressing what we feel, it's also about recognizing what the other person needs. There was no bitterness in him, no regret. Only a quiet acceptance that some feelings, no matter how genuine, don't demand action. They demand respect. He realized that love doesn't always ask us to hold on. Sometimes it asks us to let go with dignity. Their final days together were softer, not distant, but gentle. They continued to meet, to talk, to laugh lightly. Yet there was an understanding now, unspoken but shared. The story was reaching its natural pause, not because it had failed, but because it had reached its truth. On Yuya's last day in town, they met again, in the very place where they had met just days before. No promises were made, no dramatic farewells, only gratitude for the time they had shared, for the emotions they were allowed to experience, for the clarity that came from mutual respect. Yuya felt a calm he hadn't expected. He wasn't leaving with regret. He was leaving with understanding. And sometimes, that is the most meaningful outcome of all. Sometimes, love doesn't stay forever. But the feelings we carry, the moments we share, and the courage to feel deeply are what truly shape us. Not every connection is meant to last, but everyone teaches us something meaningful. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on the emotions it awakened. And if you enjoy thoughtful, emotional stories like this, consider liking the video and subscribing for more.